the idiocy that I saw on social media after that start just baffles my mind.
Yes, sir, there she goes.
Hello and welcome to the historic episode 138 of Section 138. I'm your host, Mark Colley, as always, joined by Bryson and Jacob. We took a little bit of a hiatus around the All-Star break. We're finally back, and not the series we want to be talking about, but alas, here we are. How are you, Bryson?
I'm good. This is going to be a little bit longer than usual. So first of all, I am glad all three of us are here for 138. You just surprised me with that. Second of all, yes, the fact that we all missed this last one, it wasn't just because of a usual we can't, that's something with our schedules. We all had legitimate reasons. So I was on the Wisdom Teeth IL, as you tweeted, Mark. Jacob was on the COVID IL due to vaccine side effects. And I don't know how we want to describe your situation, Mark, but at first it seemed fine. And then you drove down to watch whatever the heck we watched on, in game one. So yeah, I'll let you describe it after Jacob gets in here first too.
Well, yeah, I drove 7 hours to see that game. But yeah, Jacob, how are you?
Well, I was gonna say it's our champagne episode, so it's great time, but Blue Jays kind of ruined it. So I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, I come home, I finish work. I was like, I'm gonna go watch the game. Before I even get in my car, it's 8-0 Red Sox. So I was like, this is gonna be a brutal series. But either way, there's always the Mets to look forward to.
Yeah. Hey, they have a 13-2 record in interleague play. That's the best in all of Major League Baseball. So you never know. We could go into this New York series, sweep the Mets. We can hope for that at least. Yeah, I mean, going back, we didn't talk about that Texas series, but it was pretty fun. They outscore the Rangers 25-2, and then they come out and get swept by the Red Sox in a rain-shortened 2-game series. And it's not even close in the first game, 13-4. Ross Stripling gives up 6 runs, only gets 1 out. Anthony Kay comes out of the bullpen, gives up 5 runs. And then in game 2 yesterday on Wednesday, the Blue Jays look like they're fighting to make a comeback. They make it 5-4 with back-to-back home runs in the 6th inning. And then Jordan Romano has a very rare bad day. He gives up 2 home runs, which is double the amount of home runs he'd given up the entire season prior to that day. And the Blue Jays lose 7-5. So, I mean, I don't know. It's disappointing. I think I'm not totally shocked that they lost against the Red Sox. Everyone keeps citing their record against teams that are above 500, but I'm not surprised. Like, the Blue Jays aren't an elite team, so they're going to lose against teams that are better than them. That's just the way it works. I don't know why everyone's so surprised. It's frustrating. Yes, it's horrible to watch, especially when you drive 7 hours to be there. Um, but it's just the realities of the situation. And at the very least, we know the Blue Jays are done in Buffalo. They're done with playing home games in front of opposing fans. They're finally headed back to Toronto on July 30th. So we've at least got that to hold on to.
Good news. Looks like it's around the corner, but it's not there yet. So unfortunately, the Blue Jays, they're still disappointing, unfortunately. And the one thing going into this series, they only played 2 of the 3 games. They'll make up one of those games in Toronto, so a little bit of an extra game for people. But they go into the series 48-42, only I think a couple games back of first place in the division. Although I mean the division's not really of within their sights. Now they're 4.5 games back of that. The Yankees have overtaken them. But the more concerning thing is they were 3.5 games back from the second wildcard spot going into the series. Now they're 8. And that's not very good. I mean, yes, there's still a lot of time left. There is today on July 22nd, 8 days or 9 days, I think, until the trade deadline. So there's still some time to make up for that and say to the GM, to say to management, hey, this is not what we were. We can be better, get us some acquisitions. But not the best look, especially like the thing that I do like. You mentioned their good record in interleague play, and the Blue Jays did well against the Texas Rangers. Those are all good, but I think if you're unable to beat the good teams as well, then that's a bit of an area of concern. And we saw that last year where they make the playoffs. Yes, they had a tough matchup. Tampa Bay Rays went to the World Series. I think they were had the second best record in the league after the Dodgers, but they lost that series. And unfortunately, I think the Blue Jays, people have a lot of expectations for them and they expect them to make the playoffs, which is, I think, realistic, but I don't think that they're a finished product yet. And this is still some of the growing pains is you go like you have a perfect opportunity to take a series from Boston. You have some of your best pitchers going on. You have Robbie Ray in the second game, Ross Stripling in the first game. The second game I think was supposed to be Thomas Hatch, but that was rained out, and it didn't really go their way. They at least tried to crawl back in that second game. You mentioned with Teoscar Hernandez, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., George Springer hitting home runs. That at least kept them in the game, but they weren't able to get over that hump. And unfortunately, this is, it's just they flat out got beat. And the best thing that I can say is at least they have work to do, but at least they know what they need to do. They need to work on run prevention against better teams, but they also, I'm not going to say that they need to score more runs because I mean, the Red Sox are a good team and the Blue Jays are a good offense. And unfortunately, just sometimes you do lose games, even if you have a good offense. But yeah, it was a tough series today, thankfully, or yeah, today is an off day, and then they have at least a better series looking forward against the Mets. They're facing a former Blue Jay, Taiwan Walker, which I'm still sad about, but it should be interesting. It should be fun to see them finish off this road trip or start and then finish the road trip, go back to Toronto for the day of the trade deadline. So who even knows what the team will look like going into that game? But it as of right now, the team needs work. They need to work on preventing runs, and it just they got to make up some ground, I think, against the Mets because going into the trade deadline, going into August and September, you want to be at worst, I would say 5 to 7 games back of the wild card because at that point, it's too big of a leap. You just can't overturn those teams. So it's one where they're going to need to rebound. They're going to need to rebound quickly, and they're going to need to make up some games.
Yeah, they will be. And it's just that this past series, they kind of put themselves in a little bit of a deeper hole because coming into this series alone, on the Monday and slash after the game against Texas on the Sunday, the Jays were 2.5 games out of a wild card spot. And that was the closest I think they've ever been like all season. So people were, getting excited. And then the series goes on and we're at July, 22nd now, and we're 4.5 games out. So we're back to kind of where the Jays have been the entire time. I think, Mark, you were the one that mentioned it last night on one of your socials that the Yankees now have a better record than the Jays. I believe that was you. And that is true. And as much as the Yankees have been a tire fire, that's also not what you want to see because they have now put themselves back in the wild card race. The Jays are now behind Seattle and New York for teams that are chasing Oakland and Tampa Bay. So it's not good because you come off a weekend against Texas, everyone's excited, right? And then, everyone wants to play Boston. Everyone's like, okay, bring on Boston. Well, be careful what you wish for because it wasn't good. It was not good. Mark, you saw it in person firsthand on the Monday when it was 13-4. And yeah, it wasn't good. It was over before in the first inning. And then the game yesterday too was, it was a little bit of a disappointment because it just felt like, on paper you have Robbie Ray going up against Garrett Richards, and you figure that if you're going to win a game, steal the last game in Buffalo before you head out on the road, and then you're back at Rogers Center. That's right. It is our first episode since they've been back, so I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyways, it was Garrett Richards versus Robbie Ray lined up, and you have a good feeling about this one. And it just Robbie Ray isn't as sharp as we usually see. And Garrett Richards all of a sudden pitched decent as well, even though he didn't pitch that well either. Both of them weren't sharp, was what I'm trying to say. And yeah, the Jays kind of fell out of it. They kind of got back into it in the sixth when George Springer and Teoscar Hernandez went back to back. So that's why it was good for that. And then they lost. I guess they just lost in the eighth inning with Jordan Romano. Now, I don't know if it was because Romano pitched in the eighth inning. Maybe that was with his head. I mean, it wasn't a safe situation either. So I'm willing to give him a pass on that, but it was just something that we haven't really seen from Jordan Romano this year was to, I guess, give up 2 home runs, like you mentioned, like that. He just wasn't sharp at all. And regardless, in the end, this series doesn't end up well. Now, I don't know if you want to maybe be happy that it turned into a 2-game series and you get an extra game in Toronto because there were a lot of Red Sox fans there Monday and yesterday on Wednesday. So you get an extra 2 games now at Rogers Center in a couple of weeks. It's going to be, I guess, a 4-game series with the doubleheader on the Saturday. and you have another chance. But before that, you're going to have another chance next week because they're in Fenway. That's their last series before they come home. And we mentioned too, this weekend they're in New York against the Mets, and the Mets themselves haven't been the greatest this year. So that's why it's a decent opportunity to get yourself back in it in terms of the wild card standings and kind of get back in the win column. You got Steven Matz as well pitching on Friday night. It's a little bit of a homecoming for him. And Taijuan Walker, like you mentioned, Jacob, is pitching on Saturday. So you know that he's also going to be motivated after the blunder that he had in Pittsburgh a few days ago. I'm sure you guys saw that, where he dusted the ball away. He thought it was foul. It was fair, which it was a blow up inning for him. So you know that he's going to be pissed off as well. Unfortunately, the Jays are missing out on Marcus Stroman. I did check on that. I think he pitched yesterday or the day before, so he will not be lined up to pitch this week. I don't know if you guys are upset about that or happy. Either way, it would have been kind of exciting to see Marcus Stroman pitch against the Jays. It would have been cool if the Jays can light him up. So, I mean, that's what I was expecting. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but yeah, it's just the same old with this team. You know, you can beat Texas and everyone's happy with that, but you know, you're playing a good team like Boston. You're still trying to get back in the division race. You're not going to throw that out of the window because that also impacts the wild card standings. But you can't beat the Red Sox. And yeah, it's not the offense's fault because we've gone over the run differential this year of how the Jays have at least top three, I think, in the American League, and it still is better than Boston's. Right now it's at plus 83, and Boston's is at plus 63. So the runs aren't the problem. It was the pitching, and we know that Ross Stripling also had the blow up day a couple days ago. So just overall, it wasn't the greatest series for the pitching. But if they want to get back into this and if they want to challenge teams like Boston and like Tampa as well throughout the year or later on in the year, you know, this has to change. It has to be better. You have to at least win a series against Boston within the next 2 weeks, regardless if it's next week at Fenway or if it's that 4-game series now at Rogers Center. Of course, this weekend coming up against the Mets, I think you have to win that as well. And I think at least none of this is impossible because we know that they can do it. It's just not consistent enough where you can call it elite, like you were mentioning, Mark. So that's why it's a little bit frustrating to watch. But until the trade deadline comes, we know there are a few pieces away. And Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro continue to tell the media that they're looking into adding on pitching. You know, this is what you're going to get for a little bit. So they have to hang in there. They're currently 48 and 44. They're 4 games above 500. Like I mentioned, 4.5 games out of that second wild card spot now. That could all change this weekend if they win 2 out of 3 against the Mets, and it for sure will change if they win 2 out of 3 against Boston next week at Fenway. So they still have time, obviously, but sooner rather than later, this isn't going to cut it in terms of them hovering above 500, going on a little bit of a winning streak, going on a losing streak, and them falling back out of it.
Yeah. And they're certainly not out of it. Like you said, like Baseball Reference still gives them a 56% chance of making the postseason. That's a lot higher than what Fangraphs gives them. Fangraphs is at 31%, 538 gives it 28% chance of happening, but it's certainly something that can still happen. And you look at the changes with the Blue Jays in the second half, the fact that they are going back to Toronto, I think will provide new life to this team. The fact that we are approaching the trade deadline and they might make a move at the final minutes to improve this team. Those are changes to this team and to the energy of this team that are going to help, obviously, and they're not out of it. And they're also just a good team. They're better than their record suggests. They've lost a lot of one-run games that are kind of a flip of a coin. Like you mentioned, the run differential. It is third best in the American League. If you sort just by run differential in the wild card race, the Blue Jays are first. So it's I don't know. This team is frustrating to watch because of that fact, but I also have faith that they are good. But at the same time, we mentioned it before the All-Star break. If the Blue Jays don't go on a run here, they won't go out and acquire top-tier talent. It's their play over the 2 weeks before the trade deadline are going to determine what the front office does. If they went out and swept the Rangers, swept the Red Sox, they go to this series against the Mets, they take 2 of 3, then you're looking at a team that is right in the thick of the wild card race. They're 1 game back, 2 games back, and all of a sudden you're looking at a team that needs to have these moves made to back them up. But now you're looking at a team that's 4 games back. If this series against the Mets goes sideways, maybe they're 6 games back. That's the point where the Blue Jays say, okay, it's probably not worth it at this point. So these 2 weeks for every team, it's pivotal. 7-10 games, it matters so much. But for the Blue Jays especially, It's going to determine what they do. And that's not to say they can't win without a trade. I think if they don't make a trade, they still get that extra energy boost of going back to Toronto. But um, if they were hoping to make some blockbuster moves, if they were hoping to go out and get Max Scherzer or Jose Ramirez or Nelson Cruz or Jose Berrios, like these guys, so far with how the Blue Jays have played, they haven't proved that they deserve to get these guys at the deadline.
That's I think the biggest difference from last year compared to this year is they were 32 and 28 if I'm not mistaken, so only a couple games over 500, yet they made the playoffs. Would they have made the playoffs in a full season? I don't know. That's a different debate. Point is all they needed was to just be a little bit good enough to make the playoffs, and they did. They made the moves they needed, and it gave them the boost. But this year is different in the sense that a couple games over 500, so 162 game season, you play or you win, say they win 85. I don't think that's going to cut it. And if you're the front office, winning 85 games means they're 48 right now. They're going to need to win at least 30 to 40 games within the next couple months. Is that doable? I think absolutely. But if you're the front office, you need to really look at it and say, okay, how have they played? They play the Red Sox, Mets, Red Sox, and then I think it's the Royals and maybe the Orioles again. I'm not sure who the second team in the homestand is, but they need to win those games. You can't go into the trade deadline making moves knowing that the team's not playing well. And I know that 2 weeks or a week of the season isn't the be all end all and the determining factor in whether you make moves, but I think it has more of a say in the what the GM and what Ross Atkins, what Mark Shapiro is going to do than it wouldn't impact them. Because if you're not beating these teams, what's to say that one other piece is not going to do it? And I think that's just the most frustrating thing. Like, this is a rebuilding team, probably at the end of the rebuild, right on the cusp of contention, but they're not sort of at contention yet. So that's why it's a little bit frustrating. It's like, do we make moves? Are we I think they're confident in the guys that they have, but they're more confident in the future, maybe next year and the years after. So going into what this trade deadline means, you got to win. Like, maybe say they don't even make the playoffs, but they go on. They say at best they sweep the Mets, win the series against the Red Sox. I still think that there will be moves made. Even if they don't, there'll probably be some lower leverage moves made. Like, there'll be moves made regardless. But if you're trying to make trying to get those high leverage guys, trying to make a big splash at the deadline, they're going to need to win. You're going to need to take at least one, if not both of those series going into the trade deadline. But if you don't do anything, or if they struggle and they're not able to win, I don't know how you justify making moves, because what do you like? Unless you're able to get a steal of a deal, you're not necessarily going to give up somebody and uh, for what? Maybe a couple games, maybe, you know, a handful, maybe 2 months of games. Like that's just the way I see it. And you got to look at it at the risk. I think is if you want to make moves, you got to anticipate playing in October if the return that the other team wants is high enough. And I think it will be. Like, obviously everybody knows where the Blue Jays are, what they need. I don't see why you wouldn't ask for a better type of prospect or some type of major league caliber player from them in return for any of the guys that they want. So they're going to need to win. And these last, I think, 7 games or 4 games or 6 games, whatever it is, before the trade deadline are going to, I think, seriously steer the way that the ship goes in terms of, do you make big splashes? Do you not do anything? Do you get one acquisition? Because at the end of the day, this is one season of potentially many seasons where they're going to contend, and you're not going to make a move to maybe make the wild card game. That's just the way I see it. I don't know if maybe Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro have a completely different. Maybe they're saying, let's take a bit of a gamble, and I'm not saying that wouldn't work out, but I would rather them keep guys if they're not going to make the playoffs. If you realistically don't think that they will, keep who everybody you can in terms of major league guys, prospects, minor leaguers, and then try to go on a run next year. Because at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to give a guy up if it means you get a guy back. Like, say they get Nelson Cruz for a couple games, 40 games or whatever it is. That it would be nice. I think it would definitely help them, and he would make a splash in the playoffs. But if they don't make the playoffs, then there's not really a ton that they can do with that.
Yeah, you're right, and this team is committed to winning and still to add too. So that's why Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins continue to say that. However, like you were mentioning, how much do they give up? That's still up for discussion. Yeah, Jacob, the last episode where it was Mark and I talking, I believe we one of us mentioned about how they do need to go on a run, and they kind of gave a number. I gave a number out to see how many games they had to win if they wanted to get to at least 85 wins, and 85 wins most likely for a division won't cut it. So we're hoping for a wild card spot if that's the case. But yeah, and new names have circulated since the All-Star break. We know that Craig Kimbrell is going to be available. Richard Rodriguez is going to be available. You mentioned Nelson Cruz, Jose Barrios. There's lots of names that are starting to kind of take form in the market. And it'll be interesting to see if the Jays kind of give up for people like Craig Kimbrell, who has a club option for next year, who has, I think, an ERA below 1 this year and one of his best seasons ever with the Chicago Cubs. So it'll be interesting to see that. Richard Rodriguez as well, another option for the bullpen. So who knows how many other arms are away until they're done. I think, Mark, I think you said they're just one more away, and I think I agree with you on that. Maybe a starter, maybe, but more likely it'll be a reliever. So yeah, it's going to depend on that. And I think that regardless of what happens throughout the weekend and maybe even next week, because the same thing happened with Mark Shapiro. He was on a recent interview with TSN a couple days ago, and he was saying how regardless of what happens with this Boston series, they're not going to kind of completely 180 their thinking and all of a sudden sell. So they're committed by the sounds of it to buy and to add regardless of what happens. I think that's fine. It's just, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much they give up, but this team can't fall out of it too much before they begin doing that. So that's why I think you're hoping on and depending on the Jays to kind of stay where they are at the worst case scenario, but of course make up some ground and get within the wild card game within maybe 3 games. That's ideal. So they have some work to do this weekend. It's not out of the question, but yeah, within the next couple of weeks, within the next week, I should say alone, we're going to get a good idea, because that is the trade deadline day on July 30th when they're back at Rogers Center, which is cool. So we're going to see what the team looks like by then. It could look different. It could look the same. And it's day one for them back in their true home. So it's going to be a lot of scenarios that are going to be played. And yeah, you hope too that, teams like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Rays, what those other teams too, I'm going to be curious to see how much they add and how much, if they make a big splash at the deadline too, because there's big names available. We know someone like Trevor Story. We know that the Yankees are one team that are involved. You hope you don't see that. You hope that's not the case, but for our standpoint, at least from the division. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the market fluctuates this week. So yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about Ross Stripling quickly, because of course he came out in that first game of the Boston series, 1 out, 6 earned runs. He gives up a grand slam and Charlie Montoya yanks him. So many people have been complaining about him after that outing. They said he's, the worst starter ever. They need to put him in the bullpen. They need to trade him. They need to DFA him. They need to get rid of him after that. Where do you guys stand on this? Because I am quite the opposite. He's prior to his last start, he was in the top 10 in the American League in ERA and WHIP since May 24th. I don't know how fans have totally forgotten the success that Ross Stripling found. He had like a 2.6 ERA over that span. He was really darn good over that span of time. And it's ridiculous to me that fans have such short-term memory that one bad start makes them forget that. You look at Hyun-Jin Ryu, he gave up 6 or 7 earned runs versus the Astros in one start. He's still who we know he is. Yeah, maybe he's struggling a little bit this season, but he seems to have gotten back to what he is. Ross Stripling was way better than Ryu has been pretty much at any point this season for a good month and a half, almost 2 months, and yet fans completely forgot about that performance the instant he gave up 6 runs in an outing. So that was frustrating for me. I was very annoyed to see the fan reception on that one. But I think the struggles that Stripling has showed, I think shows that he's not a long-term solution in the rotation. Like, he's never going to be as good as he was for that month and a half span. That's not who he was. Those are I don't think those are the true numbers for him. Like, yes, he can be a lot better than his, 7 ERA at the start of the season, but he's not going to be that level of excellent the entire season. So I think what we should expect from him is somewhere in between, maybe a 4 ERA. And if the Blue Jays go out and get someone in the rotation, maybe they move Stripling to the bullpen. But it really annoyed me that so many fans were instantly condemning Stripling to AAA after one bad start.
It's the idiocy that I saw on social media after that start just baffles my mind. Like, okay, let's DFA Guerrero then. Like, let's name some other stupid things because players are struggling after one game. Like that just it's so frustrating. Honestly, this happens all over Toronto sports. I sometimes do it against certain teams because I'm extremely frustrated by them. But I understand that Ross Stripling has been one of the better pitchers since that start against, or it wasn't even the start. He came out in relief against the Tampa Bay Rays and threw like 7 scoreless innings. He's been one of their best options. Is he a sub 2, sub 3 ERA type pitcher? Probably not. Same thing with Steven Matz, but he's not bad by any means. He's a good option. The Blue Jays have him for next year. Sending him to the minors makes absolutely zero sense, especially considering that you're actually down a reliever or down a starter right now with Alek Manoah. It looks like he's only going to miss a start after I think he slipped in the dugout or on the stairs or something. So hopefully that's all it is. But if you DFA him right now, you have 3 guys in your rotation, or 4 if you count Thomas Hatch. But even with 4 guys or even with a 5-man rotation, unless you go out and get somebody else, Ross Stripling is staying here and he deserves to. Like, he had one bad outing. It was a really bad outing. I'm not going to say it wasn't. And whoever had him in their fantasy, I know I tried to trade for him a few times, kind of thanking my lucky stars I didn't, because I'd be like 300 points behind my opponent right now. But it was one start. Yes, he had a rough start to the season. He had a fantastic middle of the season, but let's give him a bit of breathing room. And I think honestly, Ross Stripling deserves it. That's all I really have to say. If people genuinely think he needs to get DFA'd, log out of Twitter, log out of Instagram. Don't even watch, because it's a dumb take. I'm sorry. It really is. He's not going anywhere.
No, and here's the thing with Ross Stripling, and I think I kind of within the last 2 weeks I kind of changed my approach for them, because originally I was one. If you go back to a few months ago, and you guys know this, is that if you guys notice, is that I wanted originally Ross Stripling to eventually be moved to the bullpen if the Jays got someone. However, with the season and the turnaround that he's had, even if the Jays go out and get a starter, I'm still taking out Steven Matz before I'm taking out Ross Stripling right now. I mean, maybe something changes within the next week, but right now, if the Jays were to somehow, get a starter, it's Steven Matz that leaves the rotation for me, because I think Ross Stripling has proven it. He has been consistent regardless of his last 2 starts. And Steven Matz, besides his first 2 starts of the season, he's been up and down all year. He's been inconsistent, and I think his numbers have shown that. Ross Stripling's numbers are kind of more of a inflation of what happened for him the first month of the season as well, which is why it's not really fair to look at his ERA from my opinion. But I think Steven Matz's ERA is a lot more accurate in terms of him being a little bit inconsistent and a little bit being up and down. So that's why Ross Stripling right now, I think for the time being, barring any injuries or something changes with the next month or two, he's earned my right and he's earned, my respect to stay in the rotation for the immediate future. I'm not going to say it's the rest of the season, but it's definitely past the trade deadline. So that's why I'm curious to see what happens with that. I know that he is going to be starting. I think it's going to be some point of it might be the Kansas City series next when they're back in Toronto. I think he's going to be starting one of those games that weekend. I know he is going to be starting the Sunday game in New York this weekend. So Mark, you're going to get to see Ross Stripling again, get a little bit of a bounce back start. And yeah, it's just that I understand people are upset. I know fans don't like Ross Stripling, but that's just the nature of the game with us Blue Jays fans. A lot of people like to overreact, regardless if it's in a good way or a bad way. I don't really pay too much attention to it anymore. It doesn't really faze me anymore, which is why, as much as we know that he has been up and down, we know, besides his last 2 starts and his first month of the season, his ERA has been solid. I know right now it's inflated again. It's at 5.04, but right now Steven Matz is the guy that goes if the Jays get a somebody for the rotation. And like I said, it could change, but right now I still think I'm still more confident with Ross Stripling than Steven Matz. And a lot of people might disagree with that. That's fine. But for me, I just think he's been more consistent throughout the months of May to July, even the first half of July before the All-Star break. It's pretty been, majority of the year that's Ross Stripling has been consistent. So that's why he's earned my confidence to stay in the rotation. But yeah, it's just disappointing throughout, regardless of what game it was this past week, especially against Boston, where you only pitch a third of an inning, you allow 6 earned runs. I get it, it happens. And this start again, especially this Sunday coming up against the Mets, it's going to be a good test for him to bounce back. And then he's going to get to pitch at home at Rogers Center for the first time right after that. So he's got a good 2 starts signed up for him and a good opportunity to get back on track for sure. And we're going to see what happens with that. But yeah, I think people are overreacting as well with the AAA demotion. I don't think that solves anything, because if that's the case, then who's coming up? And if it is Thomas Hatch, like people were, or like he was supposed to make that start, I'm still not confident with that right now. I still need him to pitch more in AAA for me to be confident with that. He hasn't even been up to the big leagues at all this year alone, not even from the bullpen. So again, who is it going to be? And I'd rather him than Anthony Kay as well. So if you're going to say Anthony Kay, don't do that, because that's not going to happen either for me. So I just don't know what other options you want the Jays to go with in the starting rotation if you want Ross Stripling going down to AAA. So in other words, it makes 0 sense.
Yeah, to put it shortly, it makes no sense. And yeah, I am going to the game on Sunday in New York. So 3 of the 5 games I've been to this year will have been Ross Stripling starts, which is just terrific. Love that. Not that I don't mind Ross Stripling, but I'd like to see Robbie Ray one of these days.
That was like me accidentally going to like every Drew Hutchison start in 2015.
Okay, but Drew, he had good run support,
Yeah,
so
no,
you
that
knew
was,
you were
yeah.
going to win if you went to a Drew Hutchinson
Oh,
start.
I saw like 2 grand slams in a game one time. That was fantastic.
Yeah, Ross Stripling doesn't get the same kind of run support, unfortunately. The first game I saw with him, that was the, I think, 6-5 loss on that Friday night in Boston, at the beginning of June. So that was a brutal loss, one where Tyler Chatwood screwed it up, and then the second one, of course, the one in Buffalo, and the third one it'll be against the Mets. So we'll see how it goes. And we have mentioned it off and on, but yes, the Blue Jays are returning to Toronto. We're all pretty excited. Tickets just went on sale about 15 minutes ago as we record this. I know Jacob's feverishly trying to get some right now. Bryson already has it handled from his inside source, but we're not all as lucky as Bryson, and I won't be there, unfortunately, at the home opener. So I'm jealous of you guys, but yeah, it's pretty exciting for the Blue Jays to be headed back to Toronto. I think, like we said, as much as this team might be lacking energy and consistency at some points, them returning to Toronto and returning to the Rogers Center could be what they need. It's like a big trade deadline acquisition without actually having to give anything up. So as great as Buffalo was, as happy as you can be with how they were treated, it's not ideal. I mean, I can speak from firsthand experience going to that game on Monday. Most of the fans were Red Sox fans. I was excited to finally see a home game, and you get the home treatment with OK Blue Jays in the 7th inning, and Blue Jay stuff on the jumbotron and all that good stuff. But when it comes to the actual fans, it's as far away from home game as possible. So certainly looking forward to the Blue Jays getting back to Toronto, not having to endure that anymore, and hopefully we can all make it to a game at some point down the line.
I'm just going to say I'm currently in the queue, and it is an absolute mess on Ticketmaster because I was first in line. I lost my spot for no reason. I think I refreshed the page and was like, yeah, your spot's no longer valid. And now there's 40 people ahead of me. So yeah, basically, guys, to anybody listening, tickets are probably not going to be available for a lot of people because it already says the tickets are extremely limited, and I've got like 3 messages from it. But either way, whether I'm watching it on TV or in the Rogers Center for the first time in 3 years, it'll be amazing. It'll be fun to watch. And who knows, this could be the boost. Like we talked about how the first game back is the day of the trade deadline. So I think it's at 3 p.m. So it would have passed by the time they play. But even if they make little moves, I think that move to Toronto and getting to play in front of your home crowd could be that boost they need. It is definitely frustrating to see a Red Sox player hit a home run, or a Blue Jay pitcher or a Blue Jay hitter strike out, and the fans are cheering as if it was the home game for the other team. So it'll be nice to see a home crowd, even if it is only, I think, 15,000 people. But either way, it's fun. It's somewhat normalcy. Maybe the capacity can expand come September, maybe in the playoffs. I know the one good thing is that the Rogers Center is considered an outdoor venue, so maybe there's some extra capacity restrictions, or lift restrictions that are lifted that the Blue Jays could benefit from. I know both the Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens could only have a couple thousand people at best, but those were, first of all, a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago in Montreal's case, and there were indoor stadiums. But this is different, and it's an exciting time. I know for me, I was actually at a cottage when the news came out, and there was absolutely terrible cell service. So I was basically just refreshing, trying to see if it actually happened. But I'm excited. I want to go to a game. I'm not going to fork over $400 or $500, which I saw on some resale sites a couple of days ago. But if they're reasonable, I'll be driving down there, and it'll be a limited capacity, less fans than we're used to, but I think those fans will be even louder than a sold out crowd. Honestly, it's been so long, and it's been, honestly, some of these guys we've mentioned it the last 2 years. Some of these Blue Jays haven't even played in front of actual, or in front of the Rogers Center crowd. You look at Ryu, Ray, Joe Panic had his whole tenure with the Blue Jays not even playing in Rogers Center. So it'll be fun for these guys, and I'm so excited to see them coming back.
Yeah. March of 2019 was the last time I was at the Dome. July 14th of 2018, or no, 2019 was the last time I saw a game. That was in New York. So it has been over 2 years since I've seen an MLB game, probably 2 years since I've seen a live sporting event. I am excited. Like you mentioned, Mark, I will be in the building. Jacob, I don't know if you're going to be there for sure, but you'll be there at some point in August. And hopefully maybe in August, all of us can go to a game. So yeah, I mean, that is currently part of the plan for me. I'm really excited. I'm sorry. I just thought, going through these months of predicting everything, or, just kind of hoping or saying, what are the chances they're going to be back? And, it didn't seem like it was realistic back in, what was it, back in March. I'm sorry. My mind is so mushed because of what's been going on the past year, even back in 2020. It's just, they've been gone for so long. They finally get to come back. Yes, it's 15,000, but we know that. Here's the thing too. In here, I was talking to one of my friends about this, and you guys can agree, because we know what Rogers Center sounds like when it's 15,000 people, because usually when it is 15,000 people, the team sucks, right? And it's an April game, it's a September game, the crowd's dead. However, if it's limited capacity and it's for the first time since March of 2019, that 15,000 is going to sound a lot louder than 15,000. And that's why I'm excited. And that's why I'm excited for the players to finally realize what's happening, and to finally just realize what playing as a home player in Toronto feels like. I know that George Springer had a run-in yesterday with former Blue Jay Jason Grilli before the game, and Grilli was explaining to him it's going to be different, and everyone knows that. But I'm just saying of how all these former players speak highly of Toronto. Hopefully within August and September, like you mentioned, Jacob, the capacity bumps, maybe potentially a sold out. You can't rule it out. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but hopefully that capacity continues to expand throughout the rest of the way. And yeah, it's just going to be exciting. And the roof is going to be open for most case scenarios, which I love. I love that the roof's going to be open. Even if it's cold out, I think they're going to have to open it regardless, unless it's raining. So it's going to be cool to see. But yeah, either way, I hope to go to a game, guys, maybe in August. Maybe we can meet up, or either way. But yeah, I will be sending pictures to you guys on the 30th. And I really do hope they treat it like a home game, or terms like a home opener, where everyone's introduced. And I hope they have something special planned for the long awaited return of them. And either way, it's going to be cool, because like you mentioned, Jacob, as well, I think it's 13 players who haven't played yet at the Dome. And someone like Joe Panic never got to play one game. At least players like Marcus Semien, Robbie Ray, who are on 1-year deals, at least they're going to get to experience it somehow. I'm happy for them as well. And, for Blue Jays fans as well in Toronto, you're finally going to see the real Vladimir Guerrero Jr., because the 2019 Vladimir Guerrero Jr. that everyone last saw, we obviously know that it's not the same Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So it's going to be exciting. Kansas City will be in town to start things off. And also going back to earlier with the Red Sox thing, how it's going to be a doubleheader. I always find it cool when there's a doubleheader at Rogers Center because it's so rare. I think the last one we saw was 2018 with the Royals when the ice went through the roof. I don't know if you guys remember that. It almost felt like 5 years ago when that happened. So, a lot of cool things that are still going to happen in terms of, uncertainty and really strange things. And a doubleheader will be one of them. But either way, they're back, regardless if people were skeptical or not. They got things done with the federal government. I think the plan in place as well. I think it's acceptable for people to kind of understand that they're going to be treated like the general public in terms of if you're vaccinated or non-vaccinated. And these are the rules that are in place and they should be in place. And this is the way that they're going to have to go by for the immediate future. And that was step one, to come home. And now you get to play in front of fans. It'll be fun. I can't wait to talk about it. And I can't wait to send you guys pictures on July 30th. So, I mean, I've been to the Dome a few times already. Like I mentioned, it's ready. And the mounds, I think as of today, all the moving trucks as well from Salem Field are going up the QEW and are going to be going to Rogers Center throughout the weekend. So they should be ready for next Friday. And yeah, it's going to be a special moment next Friday when they're back.
And the
Yeah.
tickets aren't even that bad, actually. As I look here,
Yeah.
I'm seeing like $100. I think the most I saw was like 420,
Yep.
430. They're not even that bad. So
It's not as high as people thought.
Mhm.
A lot of people were kind of overreacting with the
Mhm.
I guess like the resale price. One of my
Mhm.
friends too just got 2 for 105. So yeah, it's not as bad as
Wow.
people think. So
I just saw
yeah.
one for 38.
There you go.
That's a steal. Like
Yeah. And to start, I believe it's just the 100 and 200 level that are
Mhm.
open. So like I said, if it expands, we know that everything else is going to kind of ease their way back into play. So it's a good time.
Yeah. I got the tickets to Salem Field for $63. So that's a steal if you're going to the Rogers Center for that much money. I thought it would be way
True.
more, but get on that, Jacob. Get those tickets. Yeah, I was interested to see how they would handle the capacity because, like, yes, it's an outdoor stadium if the roof is open, but also if it's raining, you can't just leave the roof open because the Rogers Center doesn't have the drainage system that other stadiums do. So you have to close it if it's raining. So then does it count as an indoor stadium? So do they just always have to sell capacity as if it was indoor? I was confused about that, but clearly they're rolling with 15,000 and it'll be the biggest 15,000 capacity crowd that we've seen in Toronto for a good while. So it'll be lots of fun and we're obviously looking forward to that in 8 days from today. So that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll wrap up the podcast there on that optimistic note. The team on the field might not be performing, but we know that at least in a couple days we're going to have some more exciting baseball to watch. As always, you can support our podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/section138pod. You can follow us on social media on Twitter and Instagram at section138pod. You can rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, just help spread the word about what we're doing. And then you can also watch our episodes on YouTube. So I think that's it for episode 138 of Section 138. It's a big episode, but we will catch you next week.